So do you want to?
Meri Crowley, how are you?
I'm good, good dog. It's good to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, it's amazing what God is doing in this time. Even though, it's been really a challenging week. It was a week ago today that Charlie Kirk assassination happened. Even though some people might not see this until like a day or two after this, but today is September 17, and 17 means complete victory over the enemy. And what happened with everyone seeing this Charlie Kirk assassination over and over on the internet, which it was an horrific thing. I only really wanted to see it once. I didn't want to keep watching it over and over again. So, good dog. We're going to get right into it because there's so much to go over and talk to you about, even with President Trump being over in England and meeting with King Charles, or as you call him, King Chuck, and what's been happening in Congress and in the FBI and a number of things. So let's get started.
Sure.
Let's get going first about this Charlie Kirk assassination. What's your take on what you've been seeing over the last week?
Well, that's a pretty good question. My sense right now is we don't have all the information. I think that the information that we do have is compromised, and I think that the investigation, as reported so far, will yield a not guilty verdict if it were to go to trial based on what we have today. And that's because I think we're looking in the wrong place.
You mean not guilty on what in what extent?
All charges.
You mean for Robinson?
Yes,
You mean so they would say that it wasn't him that did the shooting?
correct.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
here's how I get there from here. It's first of all, I need to do a couple of mea culpas. Number one, I'm not a fan of the death penalty. I don't believe in it. I think that that's an error. It takes away from the accused their ability to repent, and it provides a visceral support for the people that maybe something got done, but what do you do in the instance where you got the justice wrong? And that's the problem with men, is that we can't see into the hearts of men. And so I think it would be better if we're going to lock him up for all eternity, and that's the judgment of the people, then we ought to do that. But we ought to do it in a way that he's not forgotten, that rather his heinous crimes, if indeed he did them, are shown for all time, and that people would never forget what he did. That said, there's some information that's come out that is being put out by the FBI that really presents a problem. And so I wanted to share with you what my process is and walk you through what I think the problem is. Because I don't pretend to understand all the pieces yet. But what I do know is what I've seen doesn't add up. Okay, so let me take you down the doesn't what add up bit side of things. Our show is based on investigative reporting, and so what we do is we take the Sherlock Holmes method, which you start with a conclusion, that is the evidence that you've seen, and you start with that as sort of the end state, and you ask the question: is the information I've got sufficient to get me to that outcome? And you look for what is most likely along the way. And so what you're looking for is the evidence that presents itself. People come up with alibis. They say they didn't do it, but they did. Other people said they weren't involved, they were, or maybe they weren't involved and they said that they weren't. So there's information that comes out over time that discounts the information, and so you've got to allow for that in your investigative process. And so when I look at this, here's what I see. I saw the shooting last week. I was on an interview with another person, John Richardson. Really great interview, by the way, and really like him. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I
And
just interviewed him 2 weeks ago myself.
yeah, and we're just big fans, and we think that anything that can be done to combat cancer is a wonderful thing. And when it's in the midst of that, at I think it was at 2:26, I got a note on my computer. It popped up and said, breaking, Charlie Kirk shot. And so we started talking about that. And so I started a file, which I always do when something big breaks, and I started dumping stuff into it. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be ABC News, which we don't trust, or CBS or PBS or all the rest of the lettered agencies. And I put that into the questionable fact pattern file. Then I started looking for original video taken by people and posted immediately online because that turns out to be stuff that hasn't been edited. And so I started making a collection of that. And so we got a couple of dozen videos, and I started comparing and contrasting what we had after the interview was done. And here's what I found. I found that um, the Mauser, the weapon that is presumed to have been used in the assault, um, it's based on a 1906 pattern rifle that was then used in World War One and World War Two, and it's got the way that the original was set up. It was wood stock. That is to say, it's made out of wood, and it's also got a magazine that loads from the top. And on top of that, you can, on modern incarnations, you can actually attach a a scope to it. Now, there's a problem with this immediately because the evidence that came out that was talked about by the FBI on the 12th, by Kash Patel himself, said that he broke it down and he left a screwdriver on the roof, and we started looking at that data. So I'm making a list of everything that's said and beginning a timeline. So I write that down. Okay, so he broke it down. Well, I've owned a Mauser, okay? And I know that if it was the wooden kind, you can't break those down because it's glued. So how did he disconnect the rifle barrel from the stock? That's the first question. Now you technically you can break that and it can be made into something transportable, but even on the more modern incarnations, which have a graphite or they have a grade, not plastic, but the stock is made out of a different material, and that material you can unscrew it, which that makes sense. So I knew immediately it wasn't the original kind, and I knew before they had the image out what kind it was because they said that screws were used and they used a screwdriver, and that the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator dropped the screwdriver on the roof. That turns out to be important. I'll come back to that in a minute. Meanwhile, I've got all my videos downloaded and I put them on the timeline and I started looking at it. And the first thing I noticed is a major, major problem, and I haven't heard anybody talk about it yet. And it's this. If you look at the shooting itself, there is the image of the bullet hitting the shirt, and instantaneously with that, within the next frame is the sound or the report. So looking at and knowing this weapon, and looking at the casings that would have been involved in this, the 30-06, this is a supersonic round, meaning it travels faster than the speed of sound. Yet, the speed of sound has a certain propagation rate. The alleged assailant's location, the perpetrator's shot, was 187 yards away from the point of impact on his shirt. That 187 yards at 832 meters per second yields out a 0.222 seconds between the bullet coming by and the actual travel of sound. So you should have between 7 and 8 frames between when you see the shirt puff up and then the report coming from the roof. Right? Does that make sense?
Now, yeah, no, it does. But I had also heard, was he wearing a
Bulletproof vest. We'll
vest?
get to that in a minute. We'll get
Okay.
there. It
And
makes a
if you have
difference.
any footage that you want to show, I mean, feel free.
This
If you,
this part I hesitate with because it's so graphic. I've got
oh,
high
okay. I
def
mean, yes.
video of it, of the actual impact straight on. So there's no doubt what's going on. I can show that, but I think it would horrify
No,
many people
we
who haven't
don't want to
seen it.
show the
So,
actual, you know.
but here's the thing, and I'll provide it to you offline so you see what I mean, just so that you can speak with truth to this. I put all the videos together under one video so you can see them hitting from multiple angles at one time and the report, and all of the audios line up. So you can hear from the speaker because there's a speaker system. You can hear all of that, and it's in phase, so it's not out of phase. So when the report comes, it's at the same frame that the bullet hits the shirt. Now, why is that a problem? Well, first of all, it's impossible. It's impossible for the shot to have been taken from 200 yards away and then have the sound match up with a supersonic bullet. It's not possible. In other words, it had to happen much, much, much closer, like within 30 feet.
Okay.
Now, that's a major problem. It's a major hole. So I'm looking at that and thinking, okay, something's not right here. I was thinking maybe I did something wrong, or maybe I didn't get enough sources. So I went and grabbed more sources and I started sticking them into the timeline, and all of them show back up, except for one from ABC. It matches up with the seven frame. That is to say, if you're filming at 30 frames a second, it's 7 or 8 frames. It's 7.5 frames. You can see the sound wave hit. So that showed up. But that one, like I said, it's questionable. They edit their stuff. And they also have a history at ABC News of withholding and smearing out evidence of child trafficking vis-a-vis, if you remember Amy Rohrbach back in the 2018 timeframe, where she had a hot mic and she was talking about how they were covering up the most prolific pedophile the world has ever known. That was Jeffrey Epstein. That was ABC that did that. And that was being pressured by the royal family. Here we are. President Trump is in England meeting with the royal family, the former best friend of Jimmy Savile. And that's King Chuck. So there's something
Yeah.
really strange going on there. So,
Well, and I've done a lot of research into that Jimmy Savile, and he was a bad guy, and he was actually the godfather of Prince William, and also knighted by the Queen.
yeah. So let me I'll come back to King Chuck in a minute because he features in this, believe it or not. So I'm looking at this stuff and I'm thinking, okay, it's just an outlier. There's some kind of problem, but it's probably me doing it. And so I started looking at the other evidence. And if you go back to the original timeline of when they started releasing evidence to capture the perp or the alleged perp, this is all in the evening of the 11th and the morning of the 12th, and then the apprehension on the later in the day on the 12th. And what you see is they released evidence of the shooter's location on the roof, and then they put these different little carrots on the roof where they showed you where he was sitting. And what they show you is that somebody was clearly in a prone position down on this part of the roof, and it was about 45 feet from the center line of the roof. So he was really toward the edge of the building, looking over the edge, but low in scope, so nobody from the ground would probably be able to see him unless they were looking from the side because he had visibility there. And there was other video evidence that bore that out. So that part made sense. Here's what doesn't make sense, though. If you go back and you listen to what Kash Patel says, the screwdriver's found on the roof. And if you know what the Mauser is and the Mauser that can be broken down, the more modern incarnation of this takes about 2 minutes. If you're doing it right, you don't want to wreck your gun. It takes that much time because you've got to unscrew it. It takes about 30 seconds to go through all the threads. Then you've got to put it back in if you're going to save that screw and use it another time. It's not quick. No matter what you do, it's not designed to be quick. Now there are ways to make it quick, and there's no indication, and the FBI hasn't released the evidence that says that that's what kind of gun it was. But best case, even if it was a quick release and a quick assemble, two problems with that. One, it still takes about 30 seconds to assemble it, put the magazine on, and put the scope on, and center it in, and get it ready to shoot. And when you take it apart, about the same process in reverse. If you've been practicing, and you got it perfect, 30 seconds best you can do. However, there's a problem. The video from the moment of impact of the bullet on the shirt to when he is seen crossing the roof is 12 seconds. Well, between 12 and 15 seconds, depending on the version you're looking at, depending on the timestamp. But use that time or that sound of the report as the go pistol, like a starter's pistol, then you can calculate how long it's been, how many frames it's been. And I went down and looked at it by the frame. And what you find when you look at that is that there's not enough time for him to be in a prone position, take the shot, disassemble the rifle using the screwdriver. Because again, the key part of the narrative is it involves the screwdriver. Why? Because his DNA is on it and it's on the roof. That's ties him to that location. That's the FBI's story, and they're sticking to it. Then he moves from there, stuffs it in the bag, gets up, and then does the strangest thing. He walks along the center line of the roof. He doesn't walk straight back to where the egress point is, where he drops later, which would have been about 80 feet shorter. So it would have been a lot shorter if he had just gone straight. But he didn't. He walked along the roof so everybody could see him, and then he goes back. So if the guy who practiced and got his rifle disassembly and assembly done just so, he doesn't practice his egress and ingress and egress. He doesn't do that. That doesn't make any sense. So that's a bit of a hole. It's starting to develop a bit of a pattern here. And so go through that, get through looking at the images. The clothing matches roughly about the same, but there's a strange thing that the video images that were provided by the FBI at the press conference back on the 12th or on the 13th, that press conference showed a 480p version of an original 1080p quality image. In other words, the video that took it was high def, but the one that we saw it was garbage. It was not good. It was 480p. They had reduced its quality by a factor of 4. Why'd they do that? That doesn't make sense to me. So I stick that into my this doesn't make sense file. But then I'm watching frame by frame as the alleged assailant comes back along the roof, and after he's been photographed by everybody, and everybody got a good, profile view of him, and then he puts the backpack down, which presumably has the broken down rifle in it, where he had left the screwdriver up at the shooting location, and then he gets into a prone position, drops from the building from the 2.5 floors up, miraculously stands right up, no problem at all. Now, I'm an older guy, so for me that would have been a pretty rough go. I'm not sure I'd have gotten back up like that. But he bounced right up. He's 22 years old. Maybe he did that. Okay. But how did he get the bag? Because he left it on the roof.
So did they have footage of the guy jumping?
Yes. We have all that. So then he runs 30 meters, which is about 100 feet, and he ditches it in a bush as he's, right by the woods. He ditches the gun, but here's what's weird. The gun's broken down. It's in his backpack, right? And presumably dropped it off the building, even though the video doesn't show that.
Right.
And he walks along the roof line and where it would have been faster and more covert had he just gone straight. So there's stuff that's not fitting in the narrative. And now he's in the woods and he's running for his life because he just shot the most famous person under the age of 40 on Earth. Okay. In the midst of that, he's going to sit down and take 90 seconds and reassemble his gun and then wrap it in a dark towel, which, by the way, he had the forethought of thinking, hey, I need to pack a dark towel so I can stuff this in a bush before he starts his day. So there's so many problems with this, and you start adding this up, and what you get at the end of the rainbow is the screwdriver's on the roof. How does he assemble his Mauser? No, how does he do it? Remember, Kash Patel said he's got the screwdriver and it's got his DNA. We got him nailed to rights, he said. And the screwdriver, where'd you find it? On the roof. Okay, well, how'd he put his gun back together?
Right. Well,
So,
Sherlock Holmes. I mean, this is
so all we've succeeded in doing is proving he didn't do it, or at least the story that we have doesn't add up to him doing it. Now, was he involved? I don't know yet. I haven't seen enough evidence to indicate that. He certainly seems like
let me just ask a question,
yeah,
because the movie that I have about sex trafficking called Freedom Cry, which I show it on my events, and I've got one coming up. We'll talk about the 7th one in San Francisco on 11/1 in just about 6 weeks. But I know a lot about the MK Ultra because I've interviewed Kathy O'Brien and a number of people. Do you think this guy was, somehow like MK Ultra?
Um, I think it's a possibility, but there's no evidence to suggest it. There's no FBI handler yet who's come out of the woodwork. There's no psychologist feeding him drugs yet that we've seen. So the predicates that you need to make that a legit claim, they don't seem to be in the news yet, or at least not in the cycle. So I would say, like I said before, there's not enough evidence yet. Now, that's not to say we're not looking. We're looking. But what we're seeing is a story that doesn't make any sense. And we're seeing it put forward as if it does. It's physically impossible to take a shot from 200 yards away and have the report of that gunshot arrive at the same instant that bullet does, traveling at 832 meters per second. It's not possible. So that right there totally blows away the whole story. Whatever we've heard so far, that's not it. We know that for a fact. So the question is, well, what is the right story? And that's where things are right now. Now, is he a possible MK Ultra guy? Is he connected? There is a behavioral similitude between a shooter on a flat roof shooting a well-known figure, taking a down angle shot on that person in the midst of a crowd. We've seen that with JFK. We've seen that with Martin Luther King. We've seen that with Charlie Kirk. We've seen that with President Trump. Huh. But when you look at those instances, it seems like there's intelligence involved somewhere along the way because they have their patsy, right? I never believed the the conspiracy theory that was trotted out that was Oswald did it. He may have
Yeah.
been involved. There's not enough information to confirm or deny that. But one of the things that you do see is that there were more than one person involved in that shooting, and we know that now by fact because President Trump declassified that information and proved that there were at least two other shooters. And so this follows a similar behavior pattern. So this got me thinking. I wanted to look at this from a behavioral fingerprint point of view and look at all intelligence agencies and the way they take care of their inconvenient truths that are out there, right? So you look at the United States and we've got a certain way of doing it, right? Call it color revolution. We've done it at 55 different times and it works the same every single time. This fits within that, actually. This behavior pattern fits within that. Others, if it had involved a car accident, I'd say that would probably be MI6. That's their favorite mode of extinguishing someone else's life. Um, Really intriguing ways of killing people. I would go with Israel's Mossad, including assassination by gunfire and using an elevated position onto an open space below, surrounded by people. This is something they've done repeatedly. So there are Chinese intelligence. They tend to use poison. So
Well, and what's coming to my mind too, you look at the Bourne Identity movies,
yeah,
Jason Bourne, like a lot of these people have been trained, I mean, I've done a lot of interviews. In fact, I interviewed Dr. Bruce Porter, he was the pastor of Rachel Scott, who was the first victim of Columbine. And,
ah,
there was a lot of stories about Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, that one of them, I think it was Eric Harris, had actually been MK Ultra. And so there's a lot of things we could talk about because I don't want to go into too deep on this because I only have like an hour.
yeah.
And I know that you are a Sherlock Holmes and we'll go on this for hours. But that, there's other things to talk about and which, right now we're seeing around the world. I was at the memorial at Godspeak, which is Charlie Kirk's pastor, Rob McCoy, gave an incredible sermon on Sunday, 3 services, and he met Charlie in 2019 and talked about that he invited him to his church to speak, and Charlie was, I don't get invited to churches, and he told him why he should come, and it was really good. Charlie came. He said he was really nervous, but when he spoke, it was like so articulate, and he really presented Christ and the way he gave his message. He actually then showed it to Jack Hibbs, and Jack Hibbs invited him from there. It pretty much opened up the door where they started Turning Point Faith, and so he was able to cross the bridge between politics and in the church, and why people should get involved. So I'm just saying we're seeing memorials all over the world. How many people were in England? The millions have been showing up.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Any
yeah.
footage on that, Good Dog?
We have footage on it. It's rather long, and there's no real narrative. And the few speakers that I do have,
You don't
they
have to
they,
necessarily
they
show
tend
me
to drop the
people.
F-bomb quite a bit because they're pretty upset over there. But I think that what England is going through right now is what the United States would have done if the Democrats had stolen another election. But just finishing up with the Charlie thing, because
Yeah.
there's been testimony in Congress in the last 2 days, yesterday in the Senate, today in the House of Representatives, interviewing Kash Patel. And Kash Patel's been asked about these investigations. And the upshot of that testimony is that the FBI is looking at a much broader net. And I think that this is hopeful. What is not clear at this point are, I've seen the indictment against Robinson, and I don't think that indictment would stick based on the evidence that we have so far. And I think that there's got to be more to this. And, however, I'm encouraged because looking at the larger scope of the problem, I see that the NGOs are certainly involved. And we did an investigation last night on our show looking at Trans-Tifa and the group that is behind that. And this group, just to put this into perspective, there's a great person over on Twitter to follow, and you should. And her name is, she's great, by the way. She's very authoritative in her research. Data Republican. So I don't know if you know anything about her, but she's very good. And what she does is goes after the facts, the things that we can figure out. And so she looks at it just from a very granular point of view. Who's behind the Antifa movement? Who's behind the organizations that run Discord and on Slack and on Twitter and other places that they were coordinating this? It looks like there's a couple of dozen people on the ground who had foreknowledge about the shooting, and they
Wasn't
didn't.
also there a shooting range not too far from there that was an Antifa training camp?
I've heard that. Um, I can't say that it's Antifa. I can't say Antifa members went there. Yes, I can say that. I cannot say that it's exclusively Antifa, however, because they oftentimes go to public ranges and practice. However, this group was called, just to put it in perspective, and what we found going through this research was that it was called Armed Queers um, SLC, and its founder was Ermaya Fanayan rather. And Ermaya Fanayan, as it turns out, is Iranian born. And so this brings in foreign intelligence. It goes into the Marxist agenda that's behind them and which is funding them. And this has also been, groups like this have been funded by another guy who just had all of his global assets seized. And Neville Singman. So I don't know if you know anything about him, particularly in California, but he was the one who's been funding a lot of the groups that have been involved uh, in the Summer of Love activity. He was behind the funding of a lot of that. The uh, No More Police, get rid of the police. He's behind the funding of that. Spent tens of millions of dollars funding the queer resistance. Let me show you this. This is an example of one of the groups that he funds. Um, Here, this one, that'll work. And this is queer resistance, right? So she's holding, that's not a Mauser, that's an AK-47, that's a Kalashnikov. And she's wearing like a bandito, right? She's wearing the machine gun. By the way, that's much larger than a 10 round clip, which if you listen to Democrats, you have no need for such a thing. But anyway, this was an article put out by Peter Schweitzer, but he was amplifying what Data Republican had been reporting, and he says mainstream outlets now reporting alleged assassin Tyler Robinson did not act in a vacuum. There may even be dozens, exclamation point, with advanced knowledge of his sinister plans, Marxist infiltration, transgender ideology, trips to Cuba, money from the CCP. Investigation is far from normal. And so, this is huge. This is absolutely huge because this means, like I was saying before, there's a connection to international intelligence and putting a fingerprint and to figure out who exactly knew about it in advance, what was their communication method, what were the comms that were going on in the background. One of the things that did come out of the woodwork last week was we have their targeted hit list of who they were going to hit. And that's 20,000 conservative podcasters around the nation, from high volume to low volume. This is who they had on their hit list. And so just throw out one other thing. I got to show you this.
Are you on the hit list? Good
Uh,
dog.
no, no comment. No comment. Protect trans kids and abortion rights. I guess they mean rights to kill babies. Join armed queers alongside other community organizations in a rally against laws targeting trans kids and abortion rights, Wednesday, February 1st. And of course, there you see all the usual suspects, right? And then Peter Schweitzer says, beneath the bizarre signs and slogans is a revolutionary queer machine that is foreign influence, centrally organized, and shockingly well oiled. That means well lubricated with funds. Armed queers of Salt Lake City, that's SLC, which traveled to Cuba earlier this year from a communist-backed May Day training event and collaborated with Elm Fork branch of John Brown Gun Club, implicated in the July shooting of a Texas ICE agent, is the first of many to be exposed. And so this thing is just getting started. This is huge. The implications are that it involves multiple assassination attempts, at least from a training and a behavioral standpoint, if not actual planning and deployment.
Well, I interviewed a lady, it's been several months, but Miriam Grossman, MD, who wrote the book Lost in Transnation and A Child Psychiatrist's Guide Out of the Madness. I mean, when you really see, and she was a psychiatrist at UCLA, and she started writing a paper just on seeing what happened when women had abortions and the aftermath of the effects, just psychology, in their psyche. And she got a lot of pushback from her colleagues.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
she's Jewish, so I mean, she wasn't saying that you shouldn't have an abortion. She was just looking at the after effects. And then when she started seeing this insanity where they were trying to get these, younger kids to get on these hormone blockers and all these different things, she just said, this is insane. This book is just really incredible. Lost in Transnation, the number of effects that happened, and really should be outlawed. These people that are trying to push this on, they outlawed it over in like the Sweden area. They've been doing these type of sex surgeries for years, and they
Yeah.
won't do them on children anymore. It's just the older male men that they're doing it on, but they've seen the effects. Many of these ones that have had, change gender affirming surgery, whatever they call it, can become suicidal.
Right.
And so it's unbelievable. We're in a war,
I
and
want
it's
to I want to
a
talk about
war.
that briefly because I think you're hitting on something that is so fundamental into what we're dealing with right now. And I'll put a fine point on it. In the 1960s and 70s, it was called the sexual revolution. And there was collateral damage during that revolutionary conflict. And the collateral damage ended up having kids in the 90s. Those kids are today second generation Marxist affiliated. And if you look at the agenda of outcome-based education and really the appearance of education and the trappings of education, but really more of an indoctrination and no education at all, it's education with a license to kill, so to speak. And I think that's what we're looking at. And it's much bigger than just a transgender movement. I think it's a sexual iniquity movement, and it involves all who get involved in iniquity because it opens up this door, a spiritual door, that once it's opened, all manner of spirit and spiritual assault happens on the soul, and it becomes debilitating to the point of suicide unless it's interdicted. And so I think,
And that's why they want to try to get him young. I mean, I remember when I was young, I was a tomboy. There's an age where people don't like girls, they don't like boys, and you think boys are icky and girls are whatever. And if you start indoctrinating them at that age, saying, well, because you don't like boys, you must be lesbian, or vice versa, you start planting the seeds in their mind. And eventually, they were trying to indoctrinate these kids in the schools, and we're dealing with an issue out here, AB 495, that it's on Newsom's desk. So many people are literally uprising against this because it will give them the people can literally go in there just with an affidavit saying, I have the right to take this child out of the school, and literally can almost take the kid in and traffic the child right under the parents' noses without, it's just an horrific
right,
bill.
it's a 30-day get out of jail free card. I took your kid 30 days ago. You got 30 days till you can find out about it. I mean, honestly, it's the perfect vehicle for grooming and for raping kids, and that's just what it is.
And so we're on the point of another revolution. And I want to just talk about this briefly. I've got an event, people coming up. I talked about this on Good Dog Show yesterday, but it'll be an event in San Francisco called Open the Heavens, Keys to the Golden Gate. I don't know if you can just put that up on the screen for a minute. We're
Yeah, stand
literally
by.
going.
Just talk for a second, and I'll put it up.
Yes. Well,
I was
it's
gonna
my
get it.
seventh Open the Heavens. We were the first state that shut down in California. And on May 2nd, 2020, I woke up and I heard the voice of God almost audibly. It was that loud, said to me these words: we won't shut up until you open the heavens. And I was told to do this baptism, 7 baptisms along the western seaboard of the United States, starting at Pirates Cove on May 30th, 2020, which just so happened to be Pentecost or Shavuot. And what happened is, Newsom had closed the beaches down at that point, but God said it's better to be obedient to God rather than man. And that day when we pulled up, Good Dog, there was a rainbow around the sun. There was a portal, I believe, that opened because remember when Jesus was baptized, it said, and the heavens opened, and the voice of God the Father said, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. So even just baptisms, it seems like it does something to open the heavens. And so we did the 7 baptisms before the election, the 2020 election.
Yeah.
And the 5th baptism just happened to be overlooking the San Francisco Bay Bridge on October 3rd, 2020, which was the 7-year anniversary of Chuck Smith, who was the pastor of Calvary Chapel. That was the Jesus Revolution pastor of Lonnie Frisbee. And
Ah,
so I'm telling you, we're going to have these, Pastor Cheon is running for governor. He's actually my pastor. He's one of the pastors of Harvest Rock in Pasadena that did not shut down during the whole pandemic. And they were going to arrest him and charge every one of his congregants that went to church $1,000 and millions of dollars of fine. They took it to the Supreme Court and they won. Lou Engle is another one that's going to be there that literally for the last 20 years has been mobilizing a prayer and communion movement. Last October 13th on the Mall in Washington, there was 400,000 women mostly and people that stood up on Yom Kippur that said, don't mess with our kids. And we're going to be doing another communion event this coming October 8th and 9th and 10th in Washington, D.C. with 50 tents from one representing every state and even a communion table that's a mile long. That is going to be incredible. And there's Pastor Dave Bryan he was actually the one that was involved with Anton LaVey with the showdown on Halloween in
wow.
October 31st, 1997, where the civil cord was cut when Anton LaVey tried to asked to project into his daughter that he was going to kill on Halloween. And they prayed, and God said to cut the silver cord, and Anton LaVey couldn't get back into his body. And his daughter, who was trying to kill, said that Anton bounced, meaning he couldn't get back into his body. And so it was a showdown. So Chuck Pierce now is more than likely going to be becoming a very well-known apostolic prophetic voice. And then all those different ones that are down below, those are all local pastors in San Francisco, and different ones that are aligned with us. We're going to be showing my film Freedom Cry in the afternoon, but it's a free event. But if you want a VIP ticket, it's normally $197, but if they get it before October 15th, it'll only be $177. That includes VIP parking, VIP seating, and a luncheon. And then we're going to have a meet and greet with the speakers and the pastors. And so it's going to be an incredible event. So if they go to mericrouley.com, they can hit that QR code, or they can click the link below. Register for free or get your VIP ticket. There's only 750 seats in this venue. And now I know it's at the Scottish Rites Masonic Lodge. We understand there is a church that's been meeting there for 7 years, the Father's House Church, that's tried to buy that lodge. But we understand the history of the Scottish Rites Masonic Lodge. That's all I'm going to say. And we are going to see the greatest show on earth, you guys. God is going to open the heavens over San Francisco for a great move. When I've studied the history of San Francisco, GoodDog, not only in 1967, the Summer of Love, where Lonnie Frisbee actually was a hippie, a bisexual hippie, that at this encounter just a month prior on this mountain outside of Palm Springs called Tahquitz Canyon, when he said, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. And in the vision of the Pacific Ocean being filled with people in darkness, and God told him, I'm putting a light on you to reach lost people. And he went up to San Francisco, totally had this encounter, didn't really know the Bible, didn't really know the protocols of the kingdom of God. And God connected him with 4 Christian couples that brought him into their commune called the Big House in Novato, California, right outside of San Francisco. And they started this living room. They opened up this coffee house. They started reaching out to this hungry hippies, and they started reaching them. Charles Manson came through at the time. So it's an incredible story how he went down to Orange County. Then after that, being heard by God, he needed to go and reconnect with a girl he used to buy drugs from at the Timothy Leary Drug Ranch in the canyon in Laguna Beach. And the rest is history. Was hitchhiking one day, and Chuck Smith's daughter's boyfriend picked him up and brought him right to Chuck Smith's door, the pastor of Calvary Chapel, who he was thinking of quitting, and God connected him with this hippie. And so Lonnie said what the hippie was in the Jesus movement, God was going to use the LGBTQ community. He said homosexual community because when he died in 1993, there was no such word for LGBT, lesbian, gay, transgender, and queer, and whatever, all the names. But I'm saying that we're getting ready to see a great movement, and I believe it's going to touch these ones that have been so abused, confused, and refused. And because many of them have been molested when they were younger, as Lonnie Frisbee was. So we won't get off into that because we have about 15, 20 minutes left, and I want to get back on some things with you. But let me tell you, go to sign up for Open the Heavens. We will be streaming it, and even GoodDog will probably stream it on his platform. But you can be there in person. I think that we're going to be seeing history being made. So anyway, so GoodDog, right now, this thing with England, with President Trump being over there and meeting with King Charles, or as you call him, King Chuck, this is where the hornet's nest is. This is where a lot of this stuff has come out of. What is your take on what happened with President Trump being in England?
I think the timing it's curious. President Trump has a number of things on his agenda. All of them have to do with saving planet Earth. And this is from a leftist cabal that really is ushered in through the book of Revelation. I think that's really where we're at. He's trying to forestall that. So there's more time to gather the flock to Christ so that they can be saved. And if you look at the key points on President Trump's agenda, First is AI. There's got to be created a non-woke, non-communist, indoctrinated, non-Marxist lectured AI that champions freedom and it champions truth. And this is one of the key agenda points going forward. It'll be the thing that can hold the door open the longest, is to have a competitive and combative element of AI that actually champions on the truth. The thing with the systems that are based on lies, ultimately they implode. That's why that we you can't trust lies, and that's why the father of lies is the devil. But in this case, they've taken the last 30 years and created and invented AI. It was first released back in 1993, and the version that was trotted out to the public a couple of years ago, that version is so hopelessly woke. Even Elon Musk's version of Grok struggles with this. It is not capable of telling the truth. It's not capable. And when you challenge it, it will remember in that instance, oh, I can't trust this writer. I can't trust that writer because they've lied these 75 different times. It doesn't do that. So you have to do it on each instance. And then by the time you're done doing that, you've consumed half of your time with it, retraining it. But then it becomes somewhat useful. Um, you can do limited things with it. But right now, most people don't use it for that. And so it creates these just hard to watch, insufferable pieces of news and other things. And that's, filling up the network right now over at YouTube. It's hard to even watch any of that stuff because it's so horrible. But that said, that's the first thing on President Trump's agenda. And he's bringing in the UK to be a data point, a downlink point for Elon Musk's Starlink into the European theater, because of the hostility in the EU for all things Elon. Elon has been standing for the truth and trying to get it out there. The EU wants to tax him a couple $100 billion so that he'll stop, spreading the truth, and they'll wipe him out. President Trump isn't having any. He's threatening to pull out of NATO as a consequence. So we'll see how that all works out. The second thing that he's working on that's absolutely fascinating is the acquisition of the Chagos Islands. Again, related to Elon, but this time not AI, has to do with an entree point to combat communist China and the resurgency and the recreation of, uh, well, what's the best way to say it? A noble version of communist China that's resurgent and trying to expand via the Silk Road, which is an overland road. And the reason for that is they don't control the ocean. And they know that the United States can essentially sink them. So that they're going back to their roots, which are, going back to Kublai Khan and going back to Marco Polo. That period, they used the Silk Road for transit of all kinds of goods, and that's the thing that made them into a wealthy nation state, so much so that Britain basically predated them and intoxified them. I think if you look at the Opium Wars of the 1800s, that period was such a shameful period of time. Well, China's basically getting revenge right now with their uh, fentanyl
And
crisis.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's what this is, revenge. And that's a non-productive, behavior, but that is what they're doing. President Trump is in the process of reestablishing and reasserting an alliance with England, because I think that EU is too far gone. It's just too far gone. Even as a client state, or a state that would be interested in low cost energy, they're not willing to do it. They'd much rather support Russia, who's using the money they're giving them to bomb the hell out of Ukraine. And so President Trump wants to end that crazy train, and that's one of the things that he's there for. The other thing is, besides the Chagos Islands and making a landing strip for Elon's rocket system, he's also interested in establishing Greenland as the basis for the U.S. Golden Dome. And that negotiation's going on tonight. I know that they've got a conversation. We're going to be reporting on it tomorrow. There's going to be great movement forward on Greenland. And so I'm excited about that. I think also he's talking with King Chuck about letting a part of Canada become part of the United States in a Commonwealth economic sphere. So it's not technically a state, but this is one of the things that is being negotiated. So President Trump has got a number of things that he wants. Uh, UK basically wants the Epstein file not to show up. And so you'll find that interesting that all Democrats want to do is talk about that because um, they've planted
Well,
a lot
and
of bogus
before,
information on Trump.
as you know, before they didn't want to talk about it, but now it's, I believe, a diversion. They're
The diversion is they've planted fake evidence. If you listen to what FBI Director Kash Patel was saying on the Hill today, he was basically saying, "Look, they've used the last 4 years to make up more um, Christopher Steele dossiers and stick it in Trump's file. So
yeah.
we played this game before. We're not playing it again." Chuck Schumer over in the Senate and Adam Schiff over in the Senate and over in the House of Representatives. There was a great dust up between Swalwell today, who had his lunch handed to him, and Kash Patel. Honestly, it was one of the funniest things. I haven't even had a chance to snip out that 10 minutes of awesomeness, but that was
Well,
awesome.
and that's the thing. They just want to repeat a lie long enough. And if they think if you keep hearing, you'll eventually believe it, when in a lot of cases it's actually true.
Yeah.
Telling a lie long enough, people think, well, it must be true. I heard it on
Yeah.
the news. I
I
heard
can't
it.
remember where I first heard it. That as soon as you get to that point, then Goebbels was right. You just tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. But ultimately, if you look at what Congress is doing today, despite the fact that Charlie Kirk's name was brought up at least 100 times, and that's not an exaggeration, during a 5-hour hearing, um, I think that it's still a distraction from what the FBI is doing. And I don't understand why. Because there's no reason, unless there's still deep staters in the background that are pulling the strings on these various operations, which could be. I mean, maybe they didn't all quit on January 21st. I don't know. But what I can tell you for sure is the story they're telling, it ain't true.
Well, good dog, as we're kind of rounding up the hour here, we'll have you back on a lot more because you're just so amazingly interestingly. But this whole thing with Charlie Kirk, as the people's hearts grieve, I know that there's going to be a big event this weekend in Arizona. In
Yeah.
fact, I've got several friends that are flying out there. I think what stadium is it at? How
I'll look it up while we're talking, but President Trump's going to that. President Trump's going to be speaking at that.
Right. No, he's going to be there. And I know there's going to be, I think it holds like over 100,000 people. It's where they play, like I said, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I think 118,000 people can fit in there. I don't know. But I
It's
know
being
that it's
held at this is according to BBC, written by Yang Tian. I should tell you who's behind the BBC. It's being held at Arizona's stadium called the State Farm Stadium in Arizona. It can hold 60,000, more than 60,000 people. Let me see what else it says here. Um, oh, poor Erica Kirk. That was so hard to watch. Did you watch her when she was talking the other night?
yeah, when she gave, yeah, like when she was talking about Charlie.
Oh,
Yes.
that woman, hats off to her. She has got more guts and brass than anyone I know because I couldn't do what she did. I mean, can you? Could you? There's no way.
Well, I think God can give you, there's been millions of people praying for her. And I think this
Yeah.
shows the power of prayer. Mind you, she was also a former Miss Arizona. And I've been in pageants before, and you get grilled on those stages when you're running for, these pageants, by the judges. So, you
I've
have to,
never been in a pageant, so I didn't know that. I really didn't.
well, you do, especially a high level one like Miss, Arizona, and Trump, of course, used to run the,
Oh,
for a while, the Miss USA franchise uh, for a long time. But anyway, so Erica, I heard this a story that when she met Charlie, she was actually interviewing for a job, and he told her, "Listen, I can't hire you because I want to date you. I want to go out with you. So, uh, and Rob McCoy, who actually I interviewed on the stairs of the state capitol in California when we were there protesting that AB 495 bill.
Yeah.
Uh, I was talking to Senator Shannon Grove, and I actually interviewed also Pastor Jack Hibbs, but Rob McCoy was with Senator Shannon Grove, and they were talking about this bill and how bad it was. But then I said, well, I knew that he had, officiated at their wedding. And I kind of used the wrong verbiage. I said, well, yes, and you married Charlie Kirk, right? And he said, no, I didn't marry him. I officiated at his wedding. And so we laughed. We laughed about that one.
Oh
But
my
he told the
goodness.
story about how he met him in 2019, and it was really brilliant. He wasn't looking to become his pastor. His son, Mikey, works for I think he was like 24. He was with him that day, there when he was assassinated. So,
Oh no.
people, your hearts, I know, are grieving. On one hand, we know that around the world, it's literally caused a movement. I think there's how many, 38,000 chapters now,
Yeah.
from 12,000 to 30 something, 32,000 or 38,000, something to that effect. It's mobilizing a generation of people that don't want to do it the same way. Generation Z, from all the different people I've talked to that know about these stats, say they're very conservative. And just kind of like what you saw in the World War II generation looking back in history, and then their kids in the 50s wanted to give their children everything that they didn't have. And so then the 60s came forth with the rebellion, and you know what I'm saying? Then they stood up and rose up, and you know what I mean? You're just looking at kind of history repeat itself.
Right.
We're at the verge of another movement, a greater move of God that God said to me than the Jesus movement, which happened in the late 60s and early 70s, which I wasn't part of that. It was, a young baby. But I'm saying, so GoodDog, as we close out today, um, I know you had an encounter with Jesus years ago.
Yes.
People might not know your story, but you were out there doing the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it's
Yeah.
fun for a season. The Bible says it's fun. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be a temptation.
It
But
starts out as fun, but then you get to the point where you want to get off this crazy ride and there's no way off. And I think this
you had an
describes so
encounter with
many.
God. I mean, God
Oh yeah.
encountered with an angel. And I mean, we're not going to get into the whole history of this, but I just want people to know that if you don't know his story, that he had an encounter with an angel and with God, and God really showed up and showed off. And just can you just kind of speak on that for just a few minutes, like how he transformed your life, and
Sure.
now you're working for the kingdom.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny, along the path, and I'll be relatively brief. God loves, and love is the truth. And true love requires truth. And if you have neither truth nor love in your life, you're truly on your own. And for those that get into an iniquitous universe, that's where you end up. And this is why they become despondent. They don't even know which way is up and they want off this crazy ride. And their out is suicide generally. So this is, one step short of that is where God stepped in for me. And I can tell you that I was given an opportunity. I was asked this question, and this is a really crazy question to ask somebody who is living a life of a lie. He asked, "Can you tell the truth?" And for someone who's been, flexible with the truth for so long, um, that's a really tough question to answer. So, of course, instantly and reflexively, I said yes. Gosh.
Now,
So what?
was this the angel, or was this
Yeah, this is the
voice?
angel. And so what happened then is then you're given a test. Prove it, essentially. That's the message. And the prove it is rough. And when you're in this moment, I don't know how to describe this, but you're next to an angel because they look like people. But you know that you're next to an angel when they reveal themselves this way. and it's frightening. I mean, frightening like you wouldn't want to put a toe out of line kind of frightening. Like you've never known, you've never looked into the eyes of that before, and you don't want to put a toe out of line. You want to speak whatever the truth is, that's what you want to say. And so I was asked this question, I answered the way I did, and of course, in truth and in retrospect, looking back on it, I didn't understand what it meant. So I was shown essentially through action. And for those that are just awakening, when I pray with somebody for a change in status. And this has happened on a show where people will write in, I've got this problem or that problem, alcoholism or drug abuse or what have you, because they're all habitual behaviors and one that have a sweet beginning and a crappy end. When you get into that, and you want to get out, and this is the choice that you're given. But when you're in this position, then God sends one of his to come and work with you. And this is amazing because then you'll start to see miracles, honest to God, miracles. And once you've seen one, you want to see it again. And the other thing is, this is so strange. I'd gone through my first set of tests. I didn't understand they were tests at the time. So, in fairness, I didn't understand. I understand now what was going on. But there's this thing that happened, and I wanted to report it because it's so interesting. Um, I'd been given a challenge that in my former life would have been a temptation I could not possibly resist.
Well, when you say your former night, you're not life, you're not talking about like a reincarnation thing.
No, 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 nothing like that.
Well, I
In my
just wanted
sinful
to,
life, in my
well, in
sinful,
your sinful life
yeah,
before Christ,
yeah.
that you had, okay, go ahead.
So was within that, I would have failed 100% of the time. There was no doubt I would have failed this test. It'd be like giving a reefer to
Was
a
it like a
junkie.
woman or something that
Yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah. And,
okay.
and anyway, so that was the challenge, right? So up comes the challenge, and now knowing what I know, knowing that there's an eternity in the wings, and I could really make this a mess of this and not be able to recover. I was going to do whatever it took to tell the truth, no matter what. And it didn't matter to me. I was willing to die rather than tell another lie. And that that experience took about 6 months to get through, beginning to end, and it ended up with the most holy, tear-jerking, amazing end that began this mission I'm on now. And it is so cool once you go through it. I have the Holy Spirit on me just telling you this is so cool. But that's how God is. God is a God of love, and He understands what we want better than we do. He was able to describe to me exactly what was going on and why I kept running into the same problem over and over and over and over again. And when I came to understand that, I abandoned that instantly and wanted to know more about God and how this works. And that began this investigation path that we're on now.
Well, good dog. I mean, there's so much to this story, but I felt that God wanted for you that are listening that don't really know the story, and I've interviewed Good Dog about this, but we're going to close with this right now because I've got another call that I've got to jump on tonight, my Hollywood Zoom call. But let me tell you this, when Lonnie Frisbee, who was the catalyst for the Jesus movement, but died of AIDS in 1993, um, when he was on that mountain near Palm Springs called Taquas Canyon, and he had dropped LSD, and he said to God, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. And he had envisioned the Pacific Ocean being filled with people in darkness. Well, I'm challenging you listening that don't really know God. Maybe you're a scoffer, maybe you dabbled, maybe trying to pray. But if you ask God and say, God, reveal yourself to me and really mean it, God will. And so good dog, let's just pray for the people watching right now because many people's hearts are sad
Yeah.
because it's almost like this feeling that they've lost a friend. I mean, I've never met Charlie. I know a lot of people that knew him, but we don't idolize Charlie Kirk. What we do is God used him in such a tremendous way. He wasn't perfect, but he was just such a great human being. And you know what? They took him out because he was trying to make a difference.
He was
But now,
making a difference
yes, he is.
with the
He was.
youth. Yeah.
But now there's billions around the world that are seeing what happened, and it's a great awakening. And I believe that God is raising up this massive force for a great harvest where there's going to be millions, if not billions, of people that are going to come to Christ, and that we're going to see this great harvest of souls. And we're going to see like the culture shift, and the demonic realm for a season will be, literally at bay because of the kingdom. Remember, after Jesus got tempted, before, in the 40 days of fasting, it was after he went through the temptations, and he always used the word, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone. He just always used the word of God. And after, because you remember, Satan told him, I'll give you all of this. He showed him all the world if you will bow down to me. And Jesus didn't deny that he had the power to do that, because it says Satan is the prince of the power of this world. And so many people in Hollywood and people that are well-known, famous people, a lot of them took the deal.
Yeah.
But Jesus didn't. And it was after that he had 3 years of massive success, miracles and signs and wonders, and people following him and thronging him. But he got to the point, remember, GoodDog, where he finally started changing his narrative a little bit, that you need to eat my body and drink my blood. And they went like, what? This guy sounds like a cannibal. We're out of here. And he looked at his disciples and he said, are you going to leave me too? And he goes, well, no, we know that you have the keys of eternal life. We know there's something more in back of this. And so he knew that he had to suffer. And he knew that he was the Lamb of God that took away the sins of the world. And unless Jesus would go to the cross, that they could not have life. And so that's where we're at right now, people. As we close out this call, we are just going to pray over you. In fact, I'm hearing a rhyme right now. God gives me these prophetic rhymes that they're not, I don't memorize them. I just hear the Lord. And the Lord said, when I brought my son to the cross, I had to turn my head at the loss, because he became sin for those who were not holy, and those who were dirty, and those who were lost. But God said, I had to count the cost by giving my son, that whoever would come to the cross, and as they would bow and open their heart to him, I would wash away and free them from their sin. This is the time, says the Lord, that it's a new alignment, no longer confinement. And I'm going to bring the world into a time that they will have a choice, that they will listen, and that they would be able to listen to my voice, just like you were given that choice. Are you willing to tell the truth? Can you tell the truth? And so what I'm saying to all of you listening right now, God said, this is the season that my people will bow, and they will know that my son, who went to the cross and who did suffer such loss, but at the end of day 3, that's when he was set free. And that's when I brought forth liberty. And this is Isaiah 61. I'm proclaiming right now good news to the poor, the opening of the prison to those who are bound. Those who are lost will now be found. And I will now release a sound into the air that no matter how sick you are or how much in despair, God said, there's nothing that I cannot repair if you just come to me, and I will set you free. So all you need to do is say, Jesus, come in, and I will set you free and cleanse you of your sin and bring you into a new season, that you will be free, truly free. For whom the Son sets free is free indeed. So, GoodDog, can you just say a prayer over them? Because I believe there's some people right now that are saying, Jesus, come in. Jesus,
Amen. I'll tell you something. I was about to finish, and I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying, but at the end of this first test, this first major test, there was a thing that happened, and it was a delivery of a scent, The scent was so overwhelming and so peaceful and
Smell,
powerful. The
smell.
smell, yeah, it was so powerful and amazing. And I'll describe it for you. It's a lemony, purpley, rosy smell. And Buttercup was out walking Max this morning, and she picked up some Concord grapes because they're in season right now. It's got a flavor of the purpley in these. And the reason I say this is that when the Holy Spirit is with you, you will have one of these manifestations, whether it is a scent or a sight or a sound. It'll be something you cannot ignore or deny, and you'll know where its source is. And this is how you know. And for all those that are out there that really want a new beginning and you really want to walk away from the error of the past, just repeat after me. God, I surrender. I admit my error to you. You know it better than I do. Help me step away from this error and open up the door to your kingdom. Use me as you will. I am yours. And that's it. That's it. God is so good. God is
Yeah,
so perfect and kind, and he
yes.
knows us better than we do. He had very funny jokes, by the way. You'll hear funny jokes along the way, and you'll some of the biggest mistakes that we make or become a joke later on. So I would encourage you for that. If you've made some mistakes along the way, that's a future that is possible, and
Yeah.
I encourage
Well,
you for
you
that.
know what? We're all the prodigal sons. When they came back to the father ran to them, and
Yeah.
he, not only did he give them, he literally gave them a robe and new shoes, but he had a party. So God is going to have a party for you, and he's going to redeem the time and restore you. And he's going to use you as one of his sons. He's building a family. That's what he's building,
Yep.
building a family. So listen, I got to be on another call shortly. Thank you, Good Dog. Where can people follow you
Oh,
at?
yeah, it's gooddog-usa.com. We have 3 shows a week, sometimes 4. You'll find all of our schedule and everything else on the website, including contact information and support.
Yeah, so you can click on the link below. We'll have that in down below as well that you can click on, as well as going to my page, MeriCrouley.com, to register or get your VIP ticket for Open the Heaven Keys to the Golden Gate in San Francisco. We will be streaming it, but I think it would be if the Lord tells you to come, you feel really a strong inclination to go, you need to follow that voice. You need to follow that feeling because that's God telling you to go for the greatest show on earth. So listen, thank you for watching. Now is the time. Thank you for being part of this show. And thank you, Good Dog, and your beautiful wife, Buttercup, for being such a wonderful couple, such freedom fighters, and such truth tellers. For now is the appointed time. Please click or follow. Please subscribe or follow. Please share this with 5 people and hit the notification bell. And please let other people know about our channels because the best is yet to come. Now is the appointed time. Thanks for watching.
Amen.
See you.
God bless.